Have you ever noticed what happens in your body when your boss walks into the room? Not necessarily when he talks to you. Just when he walks in. Something changes. It may be subtle. Your posture adjusts slightly. Your voice, if you were talking to someone, changes tone. Your attention, even if you are looking in another direction, shifts toward him. You become a little more alert, a little more careful with what you say and how you say it. And the most revealing part is that this happens even when you like your boss, even when you have a good relationship with him, even when you rationally know there is nothing to fear. The body responds before reason has any chance to step in. Most people attribute this to professional dynamics, to workplace hierarchy, to the pressure of being evaluated by someone who has power over your career. But that explanation does not even come close to the root of what is happening. Because what your nervous system does in the presence of your boss is not a response to an employment contract. It is not a response to the company's org chart. It is not even a response to the 21st century. It is a response with millions of years of history behind it. And it is exactly the same response a primate produces when the alpha male of the tribe enters the group's field of view. Your brain does not see a manager. It sees a dominance hierarchy. And it has a very old protocol for dealing with that. Come back with me to a world where hierarchy was not corporate politics. It was physical. It was immediate. It was the structure that determined who ate first, who had access to the best resources, who received protection from the group, and who was left exposed when danger arrived. There was no job position. There was no title. There was no org chart on an office wall. But there was an order. And everyone inside the group knew exactly what that order was, who was at the top of it, and what the position each member occupied within it meant for them. Now imagine your ancestors' group, dozens of individuals living in constant proximity, depending on each other to survive, hunting together, defending territory together, raising children in an environment that did not forgive collective mistakes. And at the center of this group, there was always one individual whose position was different from everyone else's. Not necessarily the physically strongest, although strength mattered, but the one most capable of keeping the group together, of making decisions that affected everyone, of distributing resources in a way that allowed the group to keep functioning, of reacting to outside threats in a way the other members could follow. The alpha individual. And the relationship the other members of the group had with this individual was not optional. It was not based on personal sympathy. It did not depend on whether you liked him or not. It was structural. It was biological. It was written into the behavior of each member of the group through signals that happened all the time, automatically, beneath any conscious decision. Body posture that changed in the presence of the alpha. Tone of voice that adjusted. Eye contact that followed specific rules, how long it was safe to hold it, when it was necessary to look away. Behaviors that signaled position within the hierarchy without anyone needing to announce anything. And the individual who could not read these signals, who did not adjust his behavior according to the group's hierarchy, who ignored the unwritten rules of position and dominance, that individual created tension, created conflict, and conflict inside the group, in an environment where cohesion was a matter of survival, came with a cost that everyone paid. But the individual who understood the hierarchy, who signaled his position in the right way, who knew when to move forward and when to step back, who managed his relationship with the alpha in a way that kept his position in the group without creating unnecessary conflict. That individual survived, got resources, maintained bonds, passed his genes forward, over hundreds of thousands of years. The ability to detect hierarchy, to respond to it automatically, and to calibrate behavior according to each individual's position within the dominant structure was selected, reinforced, and carved deep into the human nervous system. Not as a choice, as a mechanism that is working right now. Inside you, the moment your boss walks into the room. Only now, we are going to understand exactly how this mechanism works from the inside. The reason your body responds to your boss differently than it responds to any other coworker has a precise explanation. And it starts with something primates and human beings share so deeply that separating the two is almost impossible. It works like this. First step, the human being has a system for detecting social hierarchy that operates continuously in the background, evaluating the relative position of each person in the environment around them. This system was not developed by Homo sapiens. It is much older than that. Primatologist Frans de Waal from Emory University, who spent decades studying the social behavior of chimpanzees and other primates, extensively documented how the perception of and response to dominance hierarchy is one of the most evolutionarily conserved mechanisms among social primates. Evolutionarily conserved means that this mechanism was so useful for such a long time that evolution kept it almost intact through millions of years of species development. Chimpanzees respond to the presence of higher-ranking individuals with a specific set of automatic behaviors. Body posture that becomes more compact and less expansive. Vocalization that changes in tone and volume. Eye contact that follows specific patterns of submission or challenge. Physical closeness that is carefully calibrated. And when de Waal looked at human behavior in hierarchical contexts, he found the same patterns. Not metaphorically. The same patterns. Second step, the neurological mechanism behind this response involves a specific hormonal cascade that has been identified and studied in detail over the last few decades. Neuroscientist, biologist, and primatologist Robert Sapolsky from Stanford University, who studied both wild primates and humans in contexts of social hierarchy, documented how a position inside a dominant structure directly affects cortisol and testosterone levels in the body. Cortisol is the central hormone in the stress response. It prepares the body to face threats. It speeds up the heart, sharpens the senses, and redirects energy to the systems that need to work in high-pressure situations. And one of the most consistent triggers for cortisol release in social primates, including humans, is the presence of a higher-ranking individual in the hierarchy. Not the presence of immediate physical danger. The presence of social dominance. The nervous system treats these two stimuli as related categories. High social dominance means control over resources. Control over resources means the ability to grant or deny access to what you need. And any entity with that level of control over your situation deserves, from the point of view of the ancestral nervous system, the same level of attention as a real physical threat. Third step, but there is a specific mechanism that explains why the response to the boss happens before any conscious thought. And this mechanism has been precisely mapped by modern neuroscience. Researcher Jennifer Lerner, from Harvard University, who studies how emotions and social hierarchy affect decision-making, identified that signs of social dominance, including body posture, tone of voice, the way someone enters a space, and patterns of eye contact, are processed by the brain in a fraction of a second before any conscious analysis of the situation. And this processing does not happen only at the conscious level. It happens at the level of the autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system is the part of the nervous system that regulates body functions that are not under voluntary control. Heart rate, breathing, muscle tension, pupil dilation, sweating. When a signal of social dominance is detected, the autonomic nervous system responds before the prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for conscious and rational thought, has had time to process what is happening. You feel the boss's presence in your body before you have decided what to think about it. And here is the detail almost no one notices. This automatic processing does not distinguish between types of dominance. The system does not have a specific category for modern professional dominance, based on an employment contract and organizational structure. It has an ancestral category for social dominance in general, built over millions of years of life in primate groups. When the boss walks into the room, the system processes the dominant signals he emits, posture, tone, the way he moves through the space, and compares them with your own relative status in the hierarchy. And that comparison happens using criteria that were calibrated not for the modern corporate environment, but for the ancestral tribal environment. Fourth step, there is a specific phenomenon that research on hierarchy and organizational behavior has identified. And it is especially revealing of just how active this ancestral system is in the modern workplace. Organizational psychologist Adam Galinsky from Columbia University conducted a series of studies on how the perception of power automatically affects physical and cognitive behavior. In one of his best-known experiments, Galinsky and his collaborators showed that individuals who perceive themselves as being in a lower power position within a hierarchy automatically reduce the expansiveness of their body language, speak less, take up less physical space, and process the facial expressions of higher-ranking people with more attention and speed than they process the expressions of peers or subordinates. All of this without instruction, without conscious decision, as an automatic result of perceiving their relative hierarchical position. And the most revealing part of Galinsky's findings is this: these automatic behaviors happen even when the individual consciously believes they are not being affected by hierarchy. Even when they say they do not care about the superior's opinion. Even when the relationship with the boss is described as calm and free of tension. The system operates below self-awareness. You may genuinely believe you treat your boss the same way you would treat anyone else. And at the same time, your autonomic nervous system is calibrating your posture, your tone of voice, your eye contact patterns, and your speed in processing facial expressions according to the hierarchy it has detected. Both states can fully coexist, because one belongs to conscious thought, and the other belongs to a much older system. There is still one final layer in this mechanism that is especially important for understanding the discomfort many people feel in situations where they are being evaluated by superiors. Neuroscientist and researcher Matthew Lieberman from the University of California, Los Angeles, identified that the human brain dedicates specific neural resources to continuously tracking the state of hierarchical social relationships. In particular, Lieberman documented that situations where the approval or disapproval of a higher-ranking person is at stake activate the same brain regions that respond to physical rewards and punishments. Approval from the boss activates reward circuits. Disapproval activates threat circuits, not metaphorically, the same circuits. To your ancestral nervous system, approval from the person who controls resources is as real a reward as food. And disapproval from someone who has power over your position in the group is as real a threat as physical danger. Which means that the anxiety you feel before a meeting with your boss, the satisfaction you feel when he approves your work, the discomfort you feel when he shows dissatisfaction, none of these states are exaggerated or disproportionate from the point of view of the system producing them. They are exactly proportional to what the system believes is at stake, which is, from an ancestral point of view, your position in the group. And your position in the group, for most of the history of the species, was one of the most important things there was. This system worked perfectly. In a small group where hierarchy determined access to real resources, where the relationship with the highest-ranking individual had a direct and immediate impact on each member's quality of life and safety, a nervous system that automatically detected dominance and calibrated behavior accordingly was doing exactly what needed to be done. The alarm was proportional to what was at stake. Then everything changed. And the brain did not receive the update. The modern workplace created something the ancestral environment had never presented to the human nervous system. A dominance hierarchy disconnected from immediate survival, but one that the nervous system still processes as if the connection were direct. Think about what happens in the contemporary corporate structure. You have a boss. This boss has real power over important aspects of your life. Your performance review, your salary, your chances of getting promoted, and in extreme cases, whether you keep your job. That power is real. It is not imaginary, and it makes sense that the nervous system responds to it. The problem is not that the system responds. The problem is how it responds. And how much? Because the ancestral nervous system does not have a category for corporate boss. It has a category for a high dominance individual with control over resources and over your position in the group. And when it places your boss in that category, it activates all the protocols that were built for that situation, including some that make a lot of sense in a tribal environment and very little sense in the modern workplace. Imagine the scene on a split screen. On one side, the ancestor in the presence of the group's alpha. The system detects dominance, calibrates posture, adjusts communication, monitors signs of approval and disapproval with maximum attention. Every signal from the alpha carries real and immediate weight over the ancestor's life. On the other side, you in a meeting with your boss. The same system detects dominance, calibrates posture. You find yourself sitting differently than you would sit in a meeting with a peer. Your voice changes slightly. You monitor your boss's facial expression with a level of attention you do not give to anyone else in that room. Every signal he gives is processed with disproportionate speed and depth. And here is where the modern world creates a specific problem that the tribal environment never presented. In the ancestral group, hierarchy was stable, known, and transparent. Everyone knew the position of each member. The signals of dominance and submission were clear and shared. The nervous system had enough information to calibrate the response with relative precision. In the modern workplace, hierarchy is often ambiguous, inconsistent, and full of undeclared layers. You have a formal boss on the org chart, but you also have stakeholders with informal power. Clients who have influence over your position without having formal authority over you. Senior co-workers whose approval matters in ways that are not written in any document. The hierarchy detection system, which was calibrated for a relatively simple and transparent dominance environment, now has to navigate a complex, multidimensional, and often contradictory power structure. And without enough clarity, the system tends to make mistakes on the side of hypervigilance. Monitor more. Process more signals. Treat more interactions as potentially hierarchical. Keep the state of alert active for longer periods of time. The result is a level of cognitive and emotional energy spent in work situations that would be perfectly proportional in a tribal environment, but in the modern environment often goes far beyond what the situation objectively requires. There is also something specific about contemporary corporate culture that amplifies this problem in a way that is rarely openly acknowledged. The modern workplace created formal systems of hierarchical evaluation that the ancestral nervous system had never encountered. Performance reviews, structured feedback, one-on-one meetings with the explicit purpose of having the higher-ranking person communicate their evaluation of the subordinate. To the ancestral nervous system, having a scheduled meeting specifically to hear what the alpha thinks about you is not a professional development practice. It is an extremely high-load hierarchical event that deserves maximum preparation, total attention, and the mobilization of all available resources. The anxiety many people feel before performance reviews is not irrational. It is completely proportional to what the nervous system believes is happening, which is, translated into ancestral language, the alpha is going to publicly communicate his evaluation of your position in the group. And your position in the group determines access to resources, protection, and belonging. The employment contract cannot compete with that framing. So what changes when you understand all of this? The first thing is recognizing that the automatic response to your boss is not weakness. It is not pathological insecurity. It is not something you would need to fix if you were a more confident person or more professionally mature. It is a hierarchy detection system with millions of years of history operating in an environment that has only existed for a few decades. The system is not wrong. It is out of place. But understanding this mismatch opens up something concrete and practical. Psychologist and researcher Adam Galinsky, whose work on power and hierarchy we already mentioned, identified that the automatic response to hierarchy can be modulated, not eliminated, but modulated by something he calls personal power anchoring. The idea is straightforward. The nervous system does not evaluate hierarchy in a vacuum. It evaluates relative position. And the perception of relative position can be influenced by the internal state you bring into a hierarchical interaction. Galinsky showed in his studies that individuals who, before an interaction with a higher-ranking person, spent a few minutes remembering situations where they felt competent and in control, showed less intense physiological responses during the interaction, and made higher quality decisions. Not because the hierarchy stopped existing, but because the nervous system entered the interaction with a different baseline. In practice, this looks like something simple. Before a difficult meeting with your boss, before a performance review, before any hierarchical interaction that strongly activates the system, you can deliberately bring to mind a situation where you were genuinely competent. Not as an empty positive affirmation, as a calibration of the nervous system. There is also something even more fundamental that this understanding offers. When you realize that the intensity of your response to your boss comes from a system that is treating the situation as if your position in the group were at stake, you can create a distinction that usually does not exist. The distinction between what is objectively at stake and what the nervous system believes is at stake. Sometimes the two align. There are work situations where your superior's evaluation has real and significant consequences, and where a high level of attention and care is genuinely useful. But there are many other situations where the system is responding with tribal survival intensity to an interaction that, objectively, has much more limited consequences. And noticing that difference, in the moment when the system is activated, is what allows you to use the response in your favor instead of being used by it. Your brain is not too deferential. It is not too anxious. It does not need more confidence before it can function well in hierarchies. It is using a million-year-old protocol in an environment that has only existed for a few decades. And the protocol will not disappear, but it can be recognized. And what can be recognized can, at least in part, be directed. The next time you feel your body respond before your mind when your boss walks into the room, you can recognize what is happening. Not a weakness. A very old system doing a very old job, in a world that changed completely without warning. If this video made you see your own brain in a different way, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Because in the next videos, we will keep revealing the ancient mechanisms that still silently control the decisions you make every day. There is much more to come, and the next one will surprise you.